Welcome to the Success Talk Show, the podcast for ambitious leaders who want to get their best results and create a workplace for their teams to thrive. Each week, we share practical advice to help you accelerate your success and grow as an inspiring leader. Now, here's your host, Leadership Success Coach, Donna Siriani.
Welcome to another episode of the Success Talk Show. This is Donna Siriani. And, as I'm sure you know, stress can have a significant impact on both your on-the-job performance and your overall health and well-being. So in this episode, I'll share 3 specific emotional intelligence skills that will help you manage stress effectively. And what I mean by manage stress effectively is you always remain calm and focused. You can change direction based on new information. You're resilient. You always have a positive attitude, and you deal constructively with negative events without, totally caving in. But before I dive into these skills, if you missed the first episodes in this series, you can find them at thesuccesstalkshow.com or in iTunes. And I really encourage you to go back and listen to them, especially the first episode, What Every Leader Must Know, because in that episode, I share a few important facts about emotional intelligence and how it relates to your own professional success. And if you'd like to download the list of all 15 skills, you can go to my website, successcompassstrategies.com/emotional-intelligence. And on that page, there's a few things relating to this topic that you could take a look at. Okay. So the 3 skills that I'll cover in this episode are flexibility, optimism, and stress tolerance. And stress tolerance is actually one of the 4 emotional intelligence skills that can derail your career if you don't pay attention to it. So really, really important. So let's start with flexibility. It's probably self-explanatory. It's the ability to manage your emotions, your thoughts and behavior when situations are changing. You're able to adapt when things are unpredictable. Maybe there's some things happening that are unfamiliar to you. But you are agile. You're capable of really reacting to change without being obstinate, rigid, or resistant. And you're able to change your mind when you have new evidence that points you in a different direction. You're generally open to new ideas, new way of doing things, new perspectives. So if you're flexible, you can handle multiple demands, changing priorities, the fast pace of the environment and things changing. Now, in the old days, just to give you an example, right now, our pace of change is so great. Things are changing constantly, and especially if your career's in technology, things are changing on a continual basis. Now, in the old days, just to give you an example, probably our parents' generation, right? Someone would have had one career and maybe work at one company for decades, right? And today, what I had learned is that, young adults coming out of college can expect to change careers, not just jobs, 6 times, which I think is amazing. So it is a skill for you to have flexibility in how you approach situations. Now, if you're not flexible, right, if what I mentioned really isn't true for you, then you may be seen as someone who doesn't adapt to new situations very well, and you don't take advantage of new opportunities. So think about this. If your team is open to change and you're not, they might not speak up with new ideas for innovation, right? Because they know that when they approach you with new ideas, you're resistant, you don't take them seriously, you like doing things the way you've always done them. So if you're generally inflexible, it might tell people that your way of doing things is outdated because you resist new ways of doing things. So I want to share a couple of examples that kind of come to mind. As I was preparing for this, an incident from decades ago flashed through my mind. And I'm dating myself here, but I distinctly remember trying to implement email. Can you imagine? Life before internet, life before email. And it was before it was commonplace. Of course, I was in technology. I was working for a large medical center, and I was trying to convince the administrators that we should implement email and how valuable this would be. And I got so much resistance. And I'll even remember one administrator, her name was Patty, how much resistance I got from the administrators. And this one in particular, I was actually surprised at her reaction. She was horrified, refused to cooperate. She said she'd never want to use email. It was just too impersonal. She thought it was a really bad idea. Now, I wish I knew where Patty was today. I could send her an email and say, hey, how's that going? How's that going? Now, not that she didn't have a good point, but when you resist change, new ways of doing things, right? It tells others that you're not open-minded, you may not be open to innovation, and so on. So it really sends a clear signal to other people when you're obstinate. The other example that came to mind is just recently. This scenario happens all the time. I was speaking with a former client just this past week who shared with me the tech company he's working for has doubled in size over the past year, and the company's facing tremendous growth. So naturally, they need to improve their processes to scale for expanded volume, right? You would need to change your processes if you were going to double in size, right? So you can become more efficient, use better processes, better technology. Now, as they looked at their internal processes, the people who created them originally are feeling really defensive. That's natural, right? They feel like, it's worked well up until now. Why do we need to change it? They maybe feel defensive about the good ideas they had way back when. And that's natural. I get it. But in your shoes right now, as a leader in technology, you don't want someone to tell you that you did it, all wrong, right? That would put you on the defensive, perhaps, to then defend. Well, this is why we did it this way. It's worked all this time. But it's an important skill to be able to see the opportunity to create that expanded vision, right? It's important to be able to see what's possible and not get stuck in the way things have always been done. Now, on the flip side, I did have another client that I spoke with recently shared a situation with me where he was working with a client. The client wanted to take an approach that he wouldn't ordinarily have sort of bought into, but he really wanted to create a win-win. He was really interested in, furthering the relationship, and he took some chances. And he said it turned out better than he could have expected. And he was really pleased with himself for being open-minded about new ways to approach a situation. It was an approach the client wanted to take. He wasn't that crazy about the idea, but he thought, well, you know what? Maybe it'll work. Let's give it a try. And apparently it worked brilliantly. So he's really happy with that outcome, better than he could have expected. So the point here is, as a leader, you need to demonstrate that you're keeping an open mind. You're managing the situation and you're keeping all of the changes on the landscape in mind, changing markets, competition, new technology, and so on. So you can actually train yourself to embrace change, right? If you use that muscle repeatedly, it gets stronger. So here's a couple of tips. Tip number 1 is to strengthen your reality testing muscles. You need to determine if you actually need to do something differently based on what you're learning. Look at data or evidence. Now, for reality testing, I went into more detail in episode 13 on decision-making skills. So I encourage you to go back and listen to that because that is crucial here. When you want to sort of defend your position, not take into account a new way of doing it, you may actually be right. Maybe your position is the best path, but you need to do some reality testing to see, is there another way? Is there another path, another alternative that could lead to an even better outcome, right? And so reality testing, you may want to do some research, homework, talk to other people, get feedback, collect data, or whatever it is. But reality testing, right? Strengthen your reality testing, and that's going to help you in being flexible. Now, the next tip is practice noticing when you're resisting an idea someone is presenting to you. In that moment, ask yourself, what can I do to learn more about this idea? Ask a lot of questions. Keep an open mind. What I'm asking you to do is to catch yourself, because very easy, I know for myself, I do this a lot, and I have to really be self-aware and catch myself because I really want to explain why something's being done the way it is. But instead, try to train yourself to immediately ask a lot of good questions be curious to really get an understanding of how this suggestion could be helpful. Things like, well, what are the benefits? How will this affect our clients? How much time will it save us? How do you see this solving a problem better, faster, cheaper? Whatever the questions are. But instead of getting defensive, immediately start asking as many questions as you can to understand that suggestion. Okay. Now, you may want to give yourself time to weigh the options. Being flexible doesn't mean you have to immediately on the spot come up with the solution. Depends on the situation. So remember, this isn't about caving in. It's about keeping an open mind when there's a better way to do something. So the next tip is I want you to still assert your point of view and your opinions. Okay? You do not need to immediately give in to show that you're flexible. So when you are in that situation, you can still assert your point of view, assert your opinions while maintaining an open mind. Because what you really might be saying is that you're flexible. You'll change your position on an issue if you've got new information that you didn't have before that's showing you there's a better way. And that's a difference. Because if you misinterpret flexibility to be, well, okay, so anytime somebody, asking me to go in a different direction, does that mean I have to always agree with them to show I'm flexible? And the answer is no, because if you do that, others will not view you as a decisive leader with high integrity. They'll view you that you're not assertive enough. So we're not saying give up being assertive. Okay, but that's the last tip because I do want to make sure that you still express your point of view. Okay, let's change over to the second emotional intelligence skill, optimism. So optimism is the ability to look at the bright side of life and maintain a positive attitude even in the face of adversity. Now, it's not about ignoring the reality of a situation, right? Because we learned in episode 13, reality testing is crucial to your success. So you can't put your head in the sand, sugarcoat everything. I mean, that's not what we're talking about with optimism. But you don't want to let setbacks completely derail you and send you into a tailspin. So let's say, for example, you do something at work, you make a mistake or you don't handle something as perfectly as you wish you had. And let's say your boss is disappointed, maybe even upset about the mistake. You, in reaction to that, might let the negative self-talk run rampant in your mind and start letting it spin and spin and spin, and that negative self-talk just kind of spirals out of control. And I do want to, share with you, I was speaking with a client recently who this happened to, and she did something that, really good intentions, but her boss wasn't pleased about it. In hindsight, she wished she'd handled it differently. She apologized, and she was really agonizing over it. Now, with a little reality testing, it was clear that she might have been agonizing and spending precious time and energy going a little bit overboard with dissecting the situation. Because it was clear, let's look at the facts. They have a great relationship. He trusts her completely. He championed her promotion. She's a top performer. Her performance and contribution is all-time high, and she's bringing in some game-changing projects. So things are going fantastic. This was just a little blip. Now, it isn't to say that there isn't something to learn from the little blip, because there is, right? There's something now. She's like, okay, I realize that in the future, there's a step that I may take differently. It is a learning opportunity. But the point here is the optimism allows you to do some reality checking, but maintain a positive attitude. Don't let a little blip become a major setback. So here's a couple more tips. The first tip I want to share with you on optimism is to write down some typical scenarios when you seem to be the most pessimistic. What are they? So what do you notice from the list? Are they mainly about technical issues? Are they mainly about relationships with other people, maybe expectations of them? What are the things you tend to be pessimistic about? Because it helps to know what your own personal tendencies are so that you can catch yourself in the moment as you're facing those situations. That helps you to clarify what those red flags are. The next tip is when you're feeling pessimistic about a situation, right? You're going into that negative spiral and you feel like something is just not working. What I want you to do is argue the opposite viewpoint, because a lot of times the time and energy spent wasted on the negative self-talk, it's in your head. It's you spending a lot of time maybe getting paralyzed, frustrated, stuck, and you're still agonizing over something. And it could be hours, right? Or days, who knows? But in that situation, one strategy is argue the opposite viewpoint. Have you ever shared a story with somebody and it's something bad, and what you're expecting them to say is, oh my God, that's terrible. Oh, that's awful. And instead, what they say is, oh, that's fantastic. And they point out the positive. You're like, wait, no, this is awful. You must not have been listening. No, wait, let me, I got to explain to you why this is not good, right? Because they immediately saw positive opportunity. They saw something that you didn't. That's what I want you to do for yourself. When you're feeling pessimistic about a situation, try to really argue the opposite viewpoint to see what are the other possibilities. So that's a specific strategy that you can use. Now, for me, I don't often do that in my head. I usually write things out on a piece of paper. It helps me to think it through and clarify when I see it in black and white right in front of me. So if you've got something, like I mentioned my client who had something happen with their boss, and you're thinking, God, this isn't good. Now he's not going to trust me. I'm worried about our relationship. Make a list and then argue the opposite viewpoint. Do some reality testing. You probably know for yourself, is optimism something that's a strength of yours? Is that a skill? Now, it's not just a personality trait. It's actually a skill that you can practice and improve. So the last of the three is stress tolerance. Now, stress tolerance is a skill that you can learn and improve, practice and improve over time. And stress tolerance, it's the ability to withstand negative or adverse events and stressful situations without having some kind of physical or emotional impact to you, like a severe symptom. And it really means to actively and positively cope with the stress. So if you had high stress tolerance skill, you're really good at this skill, I would see you as somebody who takes actions proactively to deal with stress. You have a positive attitude towards new experiences and change in general, right? You have confidence in yourself to overcome an immediate problem. You feel that you can control or influence a stressful situation by staying calm and maintaining control. You have the ability to be relaxed and composed and to calmly face difficult situations without getting carried away by strong emotions. So if all of that rings true for you, then fantastic. That skill might be very strong for you. Well, if it isn't, and this is an area where you can improve, let's dig a little further with some tips. The first tip is to ask yourself, how do you normally respond to stress? What are those behaviors, and write them down, because you can think about, what do you normally do when you're facing a stressful situation? Do you remain calm, confident, controlled, focused? Do your reality testing, strategize with others, you have techniques, etc. Think about how you normally respond to stress. What do you do? Do you internalize it? So there's a little volcano forming in your gut and then it just eventually explodes? Or do you deal with it proactively? What do you normally do? And I've got some tips for you on that. The next tip is write a list of activities that you can engage in when you're trying to minimize stress. So some examples could be going for a walk, walking out in nature, putting on some music you really enjoy that always puts you in a good mood, maybe looking at images, whether it's on your desktop or on your wall, images that might be of nature. Maybe you love looking at pictures of the ocean or mountains or flowers, gardens, whatever. So those are just a couple of examples. But what are the things that you do which very quickly, naturally help you feel more relaxed, calm, and put you in a positive mood? Okay, it's going to be different for everybody. So the value of writing them down is that this becomes your go-to list. You can trigger one of these items when stress appears on your doorstep, and all of a sudden you find yourself in a situation where you really need to shift gears and get calm and focused. So you'll have that list at your fingertips. Now, when I say this, it actually reminds me of when for many years I worked in disaster recovery. Of course, now I should say, business continuity. But naturally, all the disaster recovery plans had to be in writing so that when the moment of a disaster, or an incident, a disruption, you aren't leaving yourself open to getting swept up in a critical situation, forgetting what you're supposed to do. And in those moments, you'd go right to your script and follow it step by step. I'll give you an example. We had a lot of disruptions in the years that I was in disaster recovery and working on that in technology. Our company lost our network backbone at one point for a day, which was horrible disaster. But the one that really comes to mind is we had a London office, and it was 2007 in July. I think it was like July 7th, something like that. And a bomb went off in Aldgate Station, right below where our office building was. And it was during commuting time. So naturally, there was high emotion, fear, anxiety. Were all of our employees and our team members safe? Thankfully, we were well versed, had a script. Everybody knew what to do. We were able to verify everyone's safety immediately. My point in telling you this story is that, because we're talking about stress management, right? And for me, the most stressful situations were always in those kinds of true disruptions. In that moment, it would be very easy for leaders, individuals to get swept up in the emotion, fear, anxiety, worry, and forget what they're supposed to be doing. But what we're talking about with stress tolerance is having a strategy for dealing with the stress so that you can stay calm in the face of adversity. And in our case, we had rehearsed actions to take, we had written plans, people were trained, and so on. So when that terrible day occurred, people knew exactly what they needed to do. They followed their script, followed it step by step. So think of this as your own little personal disaster plan. When things don't go well and you've got a high degree of stress, or maybe it creeps up on you, you can immediately engage in one of these activities to get yourself calm, focused, and relaxed. Okay? So have a go-to list. Oh, I should say have your own personal disaster plan, right? So the next tip is plan your time 1 week at a time instead of only a day. And maybe you do that now. If you do, congratulations, because it's a great way to plan your time. But develop a routine where you look at the coming week, you plan out what you're going to do Monday through Friday. You use time blocks to determine where, what, when, how you're going to fulfill your goals throughout the week. Now, the beauty of doing this is that you can identify in advance stressful situations that are coming up so that you can proactively plan strategies in advance. So for example, today, if you think about the coming week, maybe you have something in particular coming up that you know is going to be stressful for you. It could be things like a critical product launch, a major presentation, a difficult or challenging client meeting, or you're handling a situation that's highly emotional, either for you or for the other people involved. So whatever your example is, if you're clear on what is coming up, you can take actions to plan in advance. What are you going to do? If you know you're going to be stressed about this, how can you be proactive, right? For example, with a difficult client meeting, you may want to, an hour before the meeting, you go for a walk, you review all your material, don't overbook yourself that morning, make sure you've got plenty of time to be calm, because if you overbook yourself, then you may end up being even more stressed about the meeting. So give yourself time to prepare. Then even following the meeting, you might give yourself some time to decompress, make notes, debrief with other people while things are fresh in your mind. So look at your week, an entire week at a time, so that you can proactively prepare for situations that you know are going to be inherently stressful. Now, there's always going to be things that crop up that you hadn't anticipated, right? A disruption, an emergency. But you can feel more in control if you plan ahead. Now, the next tip is, if the source of your stress is time management, you feel like, you're always overwhelmed, you have too much on your plate, then I encourage you to experiment with some new tactics. Because important part of stress tolerance is feeling like you're in control. And for time management, you want to have a system that works for you. So if you're looking for some additional tips on time management, I recently interviewed a time management expert. So go back to my podcast interviews, look for the interview with Dr. Sarah Reif-Hecking. She's a clinical psychologist. That's what she focuses on, is time management. So you get some great tips from that interview. Now, my last tip on stress tolerance is something that I know you already know, but you've got to have it on your list as a tactic, and that is exercise and creating and following a healthy diet. The reason I say this is because you probably know that when you exercise, it has a tremendous effect on your ability to manage stress. Now, for me, the best way for me to incorporate this into my routine for many, many years was to exercise at a health club before I went into the office. It prepared me for the day so that I was much more calm, focused. And during the gaps of time when I wasn't doing that regularly, there was a big difference in how I was able to cope with the demands of the job. So I always knew that my formula for success was to get up earlier than normal, head to the health club, then go into the office. And it always made all the difference in the world. So exercise. Now, at the end of the day, you certainly could exercise as well. But the reason experts always recommend first thing in the morning is so that you don't actually abandon it, right? Because your willpower, right at the end of the day, you don't want to say, oh, I'm too tired, I'm just going home. The other thing, as far as the healthy diet, is if you have a lot of caffeine, have a lot of sugar, especially sugar can really fog your brain. You may end up having stronger emotions, reactions because of your diet, what you're eating and how it's affecting you. Now, I'm not a nutritional expert, so I'm not going to dig too deep into that, but diet and exercise are a major strategy that you can use for improving your stress tolerance abilities, okay? So with all three of these skills, as with any of the emotional intelligence skills, it's highly likely that you have a few blind spots. I mean, we all do. So I encourage you to consider getting 360 feedback on your emotional intelligence abilities. Now, to find out what the report looks like, if you're interested, you can go to my website. And again, I mentioned it earlier, at successcompassstrategies.com/emotional-intelligence. And on that page, you'll find a sample report for the 360 feedback version. There's two versions that I posted there. One is leadership. The second one is 360 feedback. Now, the reason I mention it at this point is because my experience doing this for a while now is that you could under or overestimate how well you think you're handling some of these skills. Because sometimes your self-evaluation differs from that of your colleagues, your employees, your manager, right? It's very, very common. It's true for all of us. So for example, you might think that you manage stress extremely well, but the 360 feedback could actually show that it's one of your biggest areas for improvement. Or you think that you show great optimism and flexibility. But you know what? It could end up that that's actually a blind spot for you because others don't see it the same way you do. So think of the 360 feedback as a great way to strengthen your reality testing muscles, right? Because reality testing is all about getting data to see how that aligns with your thinking. Do a reality check. It's a great way to do it. So hopefully you found this helpful. And if you did, be sure to subscribe to this podcast. You can simply go to thesuccesstalkshow.com and click on the subscribe button. And that way you'll get all the future episodes. So thank you for listening and have a great day.